The emergency broadcast reached every corner of known space within hours. It wasn't sent through conventional channels. No subspace relay, no quantum entanglement network. It simply appeared in the minds of every sapient being capable of receiving it, from the crystalline architects of Andromeda to the methane-breathing Krell in their pressure domes. A pulse of pure information that bypassed technology entirely and spoke directly to consciousness itself. Something has awakened. The conclave of eldest convened for the first time in 6,000 years. Their chamber existed in a pocket dimension accessible only to those who had survived long enough to earn the right. 12 species, each representing civilizations that had endured for millions of years, materialized around a table that predated most stars in the observable universe. They had witnessed the birth and death of galaxies. They had seeded worlds with life and guided young species through their first steps into the cosmos. Nothing surprised them anymore. Until now. The vestige has activated, announced Architect Prime Tesselvan, their crystalline form refracting light into impossible colors. Sector 771 Omega. The Forbidden Zone. A low rumble echoed through the chamber, the Krell Elder expressing what could only be described as disbelief. Impossible. The vestige has been dormant since before the first burning. We calculated it would remain inert for another 2 billion years at minimum. Your calculations were wrong, hissed Srath, the serpentine representative of the Nex Imperium. Their species had perfected mathematics when Earth was still molten rock. If the Krell were wrong, something fundamental had changed. Tesselvan projected an image into the center of the table. A structure hung in the void, geometrically perfect yet utterly alien. It resembled a sphere, but with dimensions that hurt to perceive directly, angles that shouldn't exist, surfaces that curved through spaces the eye couldn't follow. It pulsed with a rhythm that felt wrong, like a heartbeat out of sync with reality itself. It's broadcasting, Tesselvan continued. Not in language, not in mathematics. In invitation. Invitation. The Watcher of Andromeda spoke through waves of gravity, their invisible form distorting space itself. The vestige has never communicated. It simply is. We have studied it for eons. Studied from a distance, corrected Tesselvan. Every probe we've sent was destroyed. Every ship that approached too closely simply ceased. We built the Forbidden Zone because we learned to fear it. And now it calls to us. Srath's eyes gleamed. After all this time, it acknowledges our presence. The chamber filled with cautious excitement. The vestige was older than any of them, older than the conclave itself. Ancient texts, those that survived from civilizations even the eldest considered ancient, spoke of it in reverent whispers. Some called it a weapon. Others a tomb. A few suggested it was neither, but something far more significant. A test. We must answer, declared Krell Elder with finality. This may be the moment our species have prepared for since the dawn of consciousness. The conclave agreed unanimously. Within hours, the greatest minds and most accomplished representatives of the 12 eldest species assembled their delegations. They brought their finest achievements. The architect's reality-shaping harmonics, the Krell's perfect mathematical languages, the Nex mastery of quantum manipulation. Each civilization prepared to present itself to whatever intelligence lay within the vestige. They departed for Sector 771 Omega with confidence born of millions of years of supremacy. They did not invite humanity. Why would they? Humans were barely worth acknowledging. A species that had only achieved faster-than-light travel 300 years ago. Crude, emotional, short-lived creatures who still fought among themselves over resources their technology could easily replicate. The conclave maintained minimal diplomatic relations with human governments out of courtesy, nothing more. The eldest had been manipulating space-time when humanity's ancestors were still climbing trees. The first delegation to approach the vestige was the architects. Their ship, a living lattice of crystalline structures that sang in frequencies beyond normal perception, emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Forbidden Zone. Tesselvan themselves led the delegation. They had waited 6,000 years for this moment. The architect's choir filled the void with harmonic frequencies that could reshape molecular bonds and influence probability fields. They had used these songs to build civilizations, to terraform worlds, to weave beauty into the fabric of existence itself. Surely the vestige would respond to such elegance. The sphere pulsed once. Then the song died. Not faded, died as if the frequencies had never existed. The architect's ship drifted silently, its crystalline structure dark and inert. After 10 minutes of no response, they retreated, shaken. The Krell came next with their perfect mathematical languages, equations so precise they could describe the quantum state of every particle in a star system. They transmitted proofs that would have taken lesser species millennia to comprehend. The vestige pulsed. The mathematics unraveled. Every equation inverted, every proof collapsed into paradox. The Krell fled before their own logic engines could self-destruct. One by one the eldest presented themselves. The next offered quantum manipulation. The Watchers offered gravity control. The Luminarchs offered pure energy. Each time the vestige pulsed once. Each time the offering was rejected. After 12 failures, the conclave reconvened aboard Tesselvan's flagship, silent and humbled in a way none of them had experienced in millions of years. They had poured their civilization's greatest achievements into this moment, and the vestige had dismissed them as if they were nothing. "What could it possibly want?" whispered Tesselvan, their voice devoid of its usual confidence. "What could we lack?" Srath coiled tighter, their ancient mind racing through possibilities. Then, reluctantly, they spoke the thought none of them wanted to acknowledge. "Perhaps, it does not want what we have become. Perhaps it wants what we once were." "Impossible," the Krell elder rumbled. "We are more than we once were. Evolution, advancement." "Or perhaps," interrupted the Watcher, their gravity waves trembling with an emotion that might have been fear, "we should ask someone younger." The silence that followed was deafening. "You cannot mean," Tesselvan began. "The humans," Srath confirmed. "Distasteful as it is, we have no other options." The conclave of eldest, for the first time in their ancient histories, prepared to ask for help from children. The message reached Earth's diplomatic corps at 0347 Universal Standard Time. Ambassador Chinwakumi was dreaming of her childhood in Nairobi, the smell of rain on red earth, her grandmother's laughter, when her neural implant buzzed with an emergency override. She jolted awake in her quarters aboard the USS Perseverance, Earth's primary diplomatic vessel stationed at the edge of the conclave's territorial space. "This better be worth the override, Arya," she muttered, rubbing her eyes. "Ambassador, you need to see this." Her ship's AI sounded uncharacteristically anxious. "We've received a formal request from the conclave of eldest. Priority Alpha 1. Chin sat up straight. In the 300 years since first contact, the conclave had never designated any human communication above priority Delta. They barely acknowledged humanity's existence most days. "Show me." The holographic display materialized above her bed. Architect Prime Tesselvan's crystalline form appeared, but something was different. The usual condescending harmonics that colored their voice were absent. They looked diminished. "Ambassador Chinwakumi of Earth," Tesselvan began, their tone careful, almost respectful. "The conclave of eldest requests humanity's assistance in a matter of significant importance. We understand this request may come as surprising, given our previous reluctance to engage in substantial collaboration." Chen's eyebrows rose. That was the closest thing to an apology she'd ever heard from an elder species. "The vestige, an artifact of unknown origin predating all known civilizations, has become active in Sector 771 Omega. We have attempted to establish communication using our most advanced methodologies. All attempts have failed." Tesselvan paused, and Chin could have sworn she detected embarrassment in that pause. "We request that humanity make an attempt." The message ended. Chin stared at the empty air where the hologram had been. "Arya, what am I missing? Why would they ask us?" "Unknown, Ambassador. However, analysis of conclave subspace chatter shows unusual patterns. Confusion, fear, even humility. Whatever happened out there shook them badly." Chin swung her legs out of bed, her mind already racing. The eldest species asking humanity for help was like ancient gods descending from Olympus to ask a toddler for advice. It was either a trap, a test, or something had gone genuinely, terrifyingly wrong. "Wake the crew. Give me a line to Earth Command. And pull everything we have on Sector 771 Omega and this vestige thing." "Already done, Ambassador." "And there's something else." The vestige's awakening was felt by every sapient being in known space. Apparently humans felt it too, but differently. Differently how? Other species reported it as an emergency broadcast, a warning. Humans reported it as... Arya paused. As curiosity. A question. Chin felt a chill run down her spine. What kind of question? That's what everyone seems to want to find out. 48 hours later, the Perseverance arrived at Sector 771 Omega, accompanied by a small fleet of human vessels. Chin had insisted on bringing scientists, linguists, artists, even a philosopher and a children's book author. If they were going to attempt something the eldest had failed at, she wasn't going to rely solely on diplomats and military personnel. The conclave's assembled fleet dwarfed humanity's ships. Hundreds of vessels from 12 ancient civilizations, each one a masterwork of technology that made Earth's best efforts look like stone tools. Yet when the Perseverance approached, the massive fleet parted respectfully. That alone told Chin how desperate they were. Selvin's flagship moved alongside humanity's ship, the Architect Prime's voice coming through the comm system. Ambassador Chin. We appreciate your willingness to assist. We're here to help if we can, Architect Prime, Chin replied carefully. Can you brief us on what happened? For the next hour, Selvin explained the vestige's history, or rather the lack thereof. The artifact had existed since before the eldest achieved spaceflight. Every civilization that reached a certain level of advancement eventually discovered it, catalogued it, studied it from a distance, and learned to fear it. We brought our greatest achievements, Selvin said, their harmonics tinged with something that might have been shame. Our music, our mathematics, our mastery of fundamental forces. The vestige rejected everything. It simply pulsed once and our offerings ceased to function. It didn't destroy them? Asked Dr. Sarah Okonkwo, the Perseverance's chief xenologist. No. It unmade them. As if they had never been. Our harmonics stopped mid-note. The Krell's mathematics inverted into paradox. Our most sophisticated technologies simply became inert. Chun looked at the holographic display showing the vestige. It hung in space like a geometric impossibility, beautiful and terrible. She felt something looking at it, not fear exactly but a pull. Like standing at the edge of a vast ocean and wanting to know what lay beyond the horizon. What do you think it wants? She asked quietly. That, Selvan replied, is what we hoped you might discover. We have tried approaching it with the pinnacle of advancement, with millions of years of accumulated knowledge. Perhaps it requires something we have lost along the way. And you think we might have it because we're young? We think you might have it because you haven't forgotten how to fail, said Srath, the next representative joining the channel. We have optimized ourselves for billions of years. We have removed uncertainty, inefficiency, chaos. You humans still embrace all of those things. Chin glanced at her crew. Dr. Okonkwo was furiously taking notes. Commander Rodriguez looked skeptical. The philosopher, Dr. James Chin, no relation, was staring at the vestige with an expression of wonder. We'll need time to prepare, Chin said. And we'll do this our way. Of course, Selvan agreed immediately. The lack of argument was jarring. One more question, Architect Prime. You said the vestige has been dormant for billions of years. Why did it wake up now? Selvan's crystalline form seemed to dim. We don't know. But the activation occurred approximately 300 years ago, by our calculations. Chin felt her breath catch. 300 years ago. Right around the time humanity achieved faster-than-light travel and joined the galactic community. You think we woke it up? We think, Selvan said slowly, that it has been waiting for you. The human delegation gathered in the Perseverance's main conference room. 23 people representing humanity's diversity, scientists and artists, soldiers and teachers, young and old. Chin looked at them and felt the weight of what they were about to attempt. The eldest failed, she began. They brought sophistication, mastery, power. If we're going to succeed where they failed, we need to bring something different. So I'm asking, what do we have that they don't? Silence for a moment. Then Dr. James Chin spoke up. Questions, he said simply. We still know how to ask questions. Real questions, not calculations seeking confirmation. The eldest have spent millions of years finding answers. Maybe the vestige doesn't want answers. Maybe it wants someone who still knows how to wonder. Sarah Okonkwo nodded. They brought their greatest achievements, finished works. Perfection. What if perfection isn't what it's looking for? What about stories? Said Maria Santos, the children's book author Chen had insisted on bringing. Everyone turned to look at her. She blushed but continued. The eldest showed the vestige what they can do. What if we show it who we are? Stories are how we understand ourselves. They're messy and emotional and sometimes they don't make sense, but they're true in a way facts aren't. Commander Rodriguez leaned forward. So instead of trying to impress it, we try to connect with it? Maybe it's lonely, said a quiet voice. They all turned to see Yuki Tanaka, a young linguist barely out of graduate school, looking embarrassed to have spoken. It's been alone for billions of years. Waiting. If I'd been waiting that long, I wouldn't want someone showing off. I'd want someone to just talk to me. Chin felt something click into place. All right, she said. Here's what we're going to do. We're not bringing our achievements. We're bringing ourselves. Our questions, our stories, our curiosity. We approach it not as ambassadors trying to impress an ancient power, but as— she searched for the right words. As humans meeting another consciousness for the first time, Dr. James Chin finished. With genuine interest in understanding who they are. Chin smiled. Exactly. Let's show the vestige what the eldest seem to have forgotten: how to be vulnerable, curious, and real. Outside the viewports, the vestige pulsed in the darkness, waiting. The human shuttle was laughably small compared to the vessels the eldest had deployed. No weapons. No shielding worth mentioning. Just a standard diplomatic transport with 23 humans aboard and a cargo bay filled with what the Conclave's sensors identified as musical instruments, art supplies, data drives containing literature and films, children's toys, photographs, and several boxes of what appeared to be food. They're bringing snacks? Srath hissed, watching the human approach vector. To contact an artifact older than most stars? They're bringing themselves, Tesselvan observed quietly. As we asked. The Conclave fleet watched in silence as the tiny human shuttle approached the vestige. Every sensor in hundreds of ships focused on the artifact, waiting for the pulse that would reject humanity as it had rejected everyone else. Ambassador Chin sat in the pilot's seat, hands steady on the controls despite the nervous energy crackling through her crew. They decided she would fly manually, something the eldest never did anymore, preferring to let AI handle such tasks with perfect precision. But perfect precision wasn't what they were going for. Distance to vestige, 50,000 kilometers, Arya announced. Still no reaction. Keep going, Chin said softly. The shuttle drifted closer. 40,000 kilometers. 30,000. The vestige grew larger in the viewport, its impossible geometry making Chen's eyes water if she looked too directly at it. The pulsing rhythm she'd felt since arriving in the sector grew stronger, resonating somewhere deep in her chest. 20,000 kilometers. Ambassador, Commander Rodriguez said tensely, the architects were rejected at 15,000 kilometers. I know. 15,000 kilometers. The vestige pulsed. Chin held her breath. The shuttle's systems flickered for a moment, and she felt a wave of something wash over her. Not hostile, not welcoming, just aware. Like suddenly realizing someone had been standing behind you, watching. But the system stabilized. The pulse faded. They were still alive. Holy shit, breathed Dr. Okonkwo. It let us through. 10,000 kilometers, Arya reported, and Chin could have sworn the AI sounded awed. Ambassador, we're closer than any vessel in recorded history. The comm system crackled. Human vessel, this is Architect Prime. Tesselvan's voice was tight with barely controlled emotion. You have achieved what we could not. We are witnessing history. Chin didn't respond. She was too focused on what she was seeing. The vestige wasn't just a sphere. Up close, she could see that its surface moved, not like liquid but like spacetime itself was flowing across it in patterns that suggested meaning. Mathematical? No. Musical? Closer but not quite. It was like watching emotion given physical form, thoughts made visible. 5,000 kilometers. Another pulse, stronger this time. The shuttle shuddered and Chin felt it again, that awareness, that presence examining them. She had the sudden, overwhelming impression of being a child standing before a vast library, and the library was trying to decide if she was old enough to read. We're being scanned, Dr. Okonkwo said, her instruments flickering wildly. Not our technology. Biologically, neurologically, oh my God, it's reading our thoughts. Everyone stay calm, Chin ordered, though her own heart was racing. Remember why we're here. We're not trying to hide anything. Let it see us. She opened her mind deliberately, thinking of Earth. The blue marble in the blackness. The smell of rain on African soil. Her grandmother's wrinkled hands teaching her to braid hair. The first time she'd seen the stars from orbit and wept at their beauty. Around her she felt her crew doing the same. Each person offering their own memories, their own humanity. The vestige pulsed again, and this time Chin felt something new in that pulse. Recognition. 1,000 kilometers, Arya whispered. Ambassador, I'm detecting a structural change in the artifact. It's opening. The impossible geometry of the vestige shifted. A gap appeared in its surface, not a door exactly but a space where something could enter. An invitation. Chen's hands tightened on the controls. Here we go. She guided the shuttle forward and the vestige enveloped them. Inside was nothing like Chen had imagined. She'd expected alien technology, perhaps a vast chamber filled with incomprehensible machinery. Instead, the shuttle floated in what appeared to be empty space, but space that felt different. The stars outside were gone. In their place was something that looked like the universe viewed from outside, as if they'd somehow stepped beyond the boundaries of reality itself. Environmental readings are impossible, Dr. Okonkwo reported, her voice shaking. We're registering atmosphere, but it shouldn't exist. Gravity, but from no source. Temperature is, its reading is comfortable. Exactly 22 degrees Celsius. As if the environment is adapting to us. Everyone okay? Chin asked. A chorus of affirmatives, though several voices were unsteady. Ambassador, said Yuki Tanaka, the young linguist. Look. Something was forming in the space ahead of them. Not matter exactly, but presence. Light and shadow moving together, coalescing into a shape that the human mind could almost process. It looked like a figure. Humanoid, but only because that was a shape the humans could understand. Chin had the distinct impression that if the Krell had been here, it would look like something else entirely. The figure raised what might have been a hand. And it spoke. Not in words. Not in any language Chin knew. But somehow, impossibly, she understood. What? The question hung in the air like a physical thing. Not hostile. Not demanding. Genuinely curious. Why are you here? Why did you come? Why should I acknowledge you? Chin unbuckled from the pilot's seat and stood, her legs unsteady. She stepped toward the center of the shuttle's main cabin, where her crew had gathered. They all looked to her waiting. She thought about the eldest, bringing their achievements. Showing the vestige what they could do. Humanity didn't have billions of years of advancement to offer. They couldn't reshape reality with harmonics or manipulate quantum fields with thought. They were young, crude, flawed. But they had something else. We came, Chin said aloud, her voice carrying in the impossible space, because we don't understand. Because we have questions. Because you're here and we want to know why. You seek knowledge? We seek understanding, Dr. James Chin interjected, stepping forward. Not just facts. We want to know who you are. What you want. Why you've been waiting. The others sought to prove themselves. We're not here to prove anything, said Maria Santos, the author. We're here to meet you. To listen. To share. A ripple passed through the figure, something that might have been surprise. Share. Sarah Okonkwo moved to the cargo bay controls. We brought things. Not technology or weapons. Just us. Things that matter to us. Would you like to see? The figure tilted what might have been its head. An affirmative Chin felt. The cargo bay doors opened. What happened next would be debated by xenophilosophers for generations. The humans didn't present a carefully prepared display. They didn't give a polished demonstration. Instead, they simply began to share their humanity, piece by piece, moment by moment. Maria Santos pulled out a worn children's book and began to read aloud, a story about a lost robot learning to feel. Her voice cracked with emotion at the ending, the way it always did. Commander Rodriguez produced a guitar. He'd insisted on bringing it, and played a song his mother had taught him. He sang off-key. It was perfect. Dr. Okonkwo showed photographs from Earth. Her village, her family, the face of her daughter taking her first steps. She cried while showing them. Yuki Tanaka, shy Yuki who barely spoke in meetings, began to recite poetry in Japanese, then English, then Swahili. Languages mixing and flowing, the sounds themselves carrying meaning beyond words. Someone opened a container of food, real food, not synthesized, and the smell of spices and bread filled the impossible space. They broke bread together, there in the heart of an ancient artifact, and offered some to the figure made of light and shadow. Dr. James Chin spoke about philosophy, about humanity's endless debates over meaning and purpose, about how they still didn't know why they existed but kept searching anyway. A child's drawing was held up. Chen's niece had sent it, a crayon picture of a spaceship with a smiley face. Music from 100 cultures played. Art in 1,000 styles appeared. Stories were told, arguments were had, laughter and tears mixed together. It was messy and emotional and imperfect and real. And the vestige listened. Chin watched the figure of light and shadow and she saw it changing. Becoming more defined. More present. As if by witnessing humanity's authentic self, it was becoming more authentic too. I understand now, the presence spoke, and this time Chin heard something new in its voice. Joy. The others brought me conclusions. You bring me questions. They brought mastery. You bring wonder. They have finished becoming. You are still learning. Is that what you were waiting for? Chin asked softly. I was created as a test. A filter. A way to determine which species had advanced far enough to deserve what I guard. The figure gestured, and the impossible space around them filled with visions. Galaxies being born, civilizations rising and falling, technologies beyond comprehension. But the builders did not understand their own test. They thought advancement meant perfection. They were wrong. The visions faded, replaced by a single image. A species not unlike humanity, looking up at stars with wonder in their eyes. Advancement means never stopping the journey. Never believing you have all answers. Never losing the ability to be amazed. The eldest have forgotten how to wonder, Dr. James Chin breathed. Yes. They have become so much that they stopped becoming. They reached their peak and stopped climbing. And humanity? Chin asked. You are still children. Still learning. Still making mistakes and asking questions and seeking meaning. You have not forgotten how to grow. The presence moved closer to Chin and she felt warmth radiating from it. You are ready. Not because you are perfect. Because you know you are not. Ready for what? The figure of light and shadow smiled. Chin was certain it smiled. To learn what the builders left behind. To carry forward not as masters but as students. To show the galaxy that true strength is not in what you know, but in never stopping the search for knowledge. The space around them began to shimmer, and Chin felt something vast awakening. Not just the vestige but something it had been guarding. Information, technology, knowledge, but not the kind the eldest had expected. Not weapons. Not power. Questions. Better questions. Ways of understanding the universe that open doors instead of closing them. The eldest won't like this, Commander Rodriguez said quietly. Chin looked at her crew, her beautiful, flawed, wonderful crew, standing in the heart of an ancient mystery with tears and smiles on their faces. Then it's time they learned what we already know, she said. That growing up doesn't mean having all the answers.